distinguished guests, welcome to Meet Southeast Michigan Members of Congress. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua.
Awesome to see you all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Birmingham. Welcome to fall. Yeah, I know, it's no longer summer and it shows, but welcome. We're delighted that you're all here. First of all, we're going to move to the program very, very quickly, but before I do that, I want to make some very special introductions, some people who are very important to the Chamber, but more importantly, important to all of us in this room and across the state of Michigan. First, I'm delighted and honored to welcome the Consul General of Canada, Colin Bird. Colin, thank you so much for being here. I am particularly delighted to welcome the new president of Wayne State University, Kimberly Andrews Espy. I know she'll never forget me because I literally came to visit her on her first day on the job. And which is why no one at Wayne State will let me anywhere on campus anymore from here on out. But Madam President, we're delighted you're here. We're so looking forward to your leadership. Congratulations and thank you for being here today. Also, one of the most important people in our region who owns the most important microphone in the state and perhaps the country, Steve Gregorian of the Detroit Economic Club is here today. And in order to pay the bills, I'm delighted that we have so many members of the Detroit Regional Chamber Board here today. Mike Bernard, Priscilla Archangel, Ida Bird Hill, Ken Howard, Jason Tinsley, and Carmen Ficori. And help me come review time if I've missed anyone. Thank you all for being here. I also want to make a special acknowledgement to all of the congressional staff that are in the room today. Not only those who are supporting Congresswoman Dingell and Congressman James, but I know we have other congressional staff from our other Michigan delegation. I grew up on the Hill. I started on the Hill back in the 80s when we were inventing electricity. So staffers out there, I know exactly the conversations you are having now while your bosses are sitting over here. And lastly, I want to thank my friend Guy Gordon of WJR. Guy, thank you so much for being here. Guy has done so many things for the Chamber. I fear that we're going to have to put him on payroll very soon. So today, we are honored at the Detroit Regional Chamber to host and lift up two incredibly important and talented leaders, not just for the state of Michigan, but for the United States of America. Debbie Dingell has represented Michigan in Congress since 2015, but as I told Debbie the day that she became a congressperson in 2015, that she was the most senior House of Representatives member since Claude Pepper moved from the Senate to the House of Representatives way back when. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Debbie and her late husband, the great John Dingell, for many, many years now, dating back to my time in Washington. And Debbie has had many, many titles, as you see them flashed on the screens behind me, but the most important title, and the title that I am sure got her elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, is that she's a former board member of the Detroit Regional Chamber. So Debbie has always been one of these people that tell it like it is, including to her own party. And I personally, and I think we all appreciate your incredible leadership on the bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. So Debbie, thank you so much for being here. Congressman John James may be slightly newer to the halls of Congress, but he is certainly no stranger to public service. He went from Brother Rice to West Point, and then to an incredibly decorated stint in the Army where he served with great distinction in Iraq, flying helicopters in incredibly dangerous places. Back home, John has been a steadfast community volunteer which if you're a Republican is different than a community organizer, just to be clear on that. And I can say, without a doubt, John James comes from one of the finest families I've ever had the pleasure to meet. John, actually, as impressive as he is just barely keeping up with his brother and his sister, and certainly his mom and dad. John, thank you for your leadership in Congress. Thank you for everything that you do. And thank you for everything you've done for the community even before you got to Congress. So we have a great program ahead, and I'm going to get out of the way and let things roll. Thank you again for all being here.
Please welcome U.S. Representative Debbie Dingell and U.S. Representative John James, and to moderate the discussion, host of JR Morning, Guy Gordon.
I promise we're going to keep the program moving along and that I will have you home just in time for the Lions kickoff. We're delighted to have both of these lawmakers here. As you probably know, and as Sandy said in his introduction, that he promised wasn't going to be an introduction, was that they are members of the Problem Solvers Caucus. And in Washington, this is something of a unicorn. And if you're a cable TV news viewer, it might come as a shock to you that there are actually lawmakers that are willing to work with one another and not just put partisan points on the board and fuel rancor. So we want to focus on that today because there's a lot to accomplish. This is also a rather crucial time with the budget, now just 11 working days away from the beginning of the new fiscal year. So without further ado, let's get into it. And I guess that is, as members of the Problem Solvers Caucus, and I guess I'll start with you, Debbie, what's number one on the agenda when you get back? You've got 11 days to pass 12 spending bills. Can it be done, and how do you get through the other members that are apparently some individuals more interested in making names for themselves than moving the country along?
Here's the reality. You can't we're not going to get 12 appropriation bills done, and what we need is a continuing resolution. I flatly believe that it is the wrong way to govern to shut the government down. It is not responsible. It is not the way we should run our government. It endangers our national security. And there are government employees that you depend on every single day for all kinds of things, from TSA at the airport to our military to your food safety. I could go through a list of things. And by the way, and I'm sure my colleague on the stage agrees with that. It is a very small group of people that want to shut the government down. And the president has suggested that we have a short-term resolution. Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer agreed that there should be a short-term resolution. And unfortunately, Speaker McCarthy's in a very difficult position. I'm going to let my colleague talk about it. We'll have to see what happens.
And that difficult spot is that we've got a deficit that's doubling to $2 trillion. That's the most recent forecast, in spite of the fact that the economy is growing. You know, the old notion that you can grow your way out of this isn't happening, and it was probably a myth to begin with. So how do we confront the fiscal realities and the fact that we have to have a reckoning on the deficit and the debt, but we also need to keep government open?
So the governing's not happening because it seems like the circus freaks on either extreme in both the Democrat and Republican parties are more concerned with fundraising off of crises than they are with actually coming together and fixing the problem. We absolutely must get our spending under control, full stop. But we should not do so at the expense of the people who are most vulnerable. We've been in this session of Congress for 8 months. 8 months. And we've been talking about gas stoves and UFOs while there are hungry and homeless people on our streets and in our towns. We have derailments and we have near misses in airports. What are we doing? The biggest reason I went to Congress is because I see the way the nation is going is heading in the wrong direction, and I haven't seen the leadership in this century that it requires to bring us together and come to solutions that we need. We have to make sure that we reckon our spending problem, but we can't do it on the backs of our businesses, our small businesses, and the people who need us to have good policy to move forward. Yes, we are going to have to resort to continuing resolutions. There is no feasible way we're going to get 12 appropriations bills passed because you have people, primarily in the Freedom Caucus on our right, who refuse to negotiate in good faith. So this is a great opportunity, and one of the great disappointments that I'm seeing with the Problem Solvers Caucus is those of us who are right of center and left of center. I think we have a massive opportunity in a very small, narrow majority to get things passed with the 300 plus of us in the House of Representatives who are more about pragmatic policy than partisan politics. So yes, thank you. I think that we absolutely have to get our spending under control, but we have to come up with a plan that will make sure that we, one, don't bankrupt our children's futures, but without the draconian cuts that are being proposed in the short timeline that we have.
But how do you overrule the partisan side of your own caucuses that really are, as you point out, more about fundraising and appealing to an ever narrower extreme within the party? How do you break through that? Because you represent us, I think most of us, who are in the moderate middle saying, we just want you to accomplish something and get stuff done. And please don't bury our grandchildren in the debt in the process.
So I'm going to say several things. One, look, we do have far right and far left, which are a problem. And the Speaker McCarthy is in a more challenging position because, as we all saw, it took a lot of votes to get him elected, and people don't want there to be votes with Democratic votes to accomplish challenging issues. But the people that you're hearing, and I'm not going to put names on them, but you all know who they are, who are threatening to shut the government down, are not talking about reducing the deficit. They've all got these other, they're very serious issues that need to be dealt with, like the border, Ukraine. Mitch McConnell is supporting support of Ukraine. It's about supporting democracy. So they're not even talking, you would say, well, should we be shutting it down because of the deficit? We do need to do things on the deficit, and we're all working to do that.
Do we need an independent commission to do it?
I'm so sick of independent commissions that just buy time and accomplish nothing.
Okay, so what is, if
how
not
many
that?
independent commissions?
I get it, but if not that,
we got to get some people that are on both sides that are willing to, I think within the institution of the House, be willing to say, we got to really talk about some of this tough stuff. Now, I want to tell you, I'm not afraid to stand up, nor, is John, but I've gotten in trouble with my caucus because I've gotten up and told people exactly what I think, and people don't want to hear it. They don't always think about it that way. But I warned them, that things were going to happen, and I think that we need to have more people. And you get this power of peer caucus, or you get, people become concerned they're going to get labeled with a title or whatever, and most members in both caucuses don't feel that there's something about, I'm not old, but I'm seasoned. There's something about being seasoned that you say what you say, and my staff has a heart attack about once a day, but.
yeah, that's okay. It's okay to have a faulty filter.
But we got to stand up to it,
You've already told folks, look, if you drive us off the cliff here with a government shutdown, you're going to have to, what is it, the put your money where your mouth is act?
Yeah. So put the money where your mouth is act. Where I come from, where we all come from, if you don't do your job, you don't get paid. So, if you shut down the government, Congress shouldn't get paid. And I put that bill on the floor. Because these fools, these selfish fools, are taking hostages with American lives. You know what happens when you shut the government down? What happens is when a veteran who's struggling with PTSD on his or her last legs reaches out for help for a veteran hotline, they pick it up and they get a busy signal. That's what the government shutdown means. Somebody who's looking for their Social Security benefits, and they go and they get the help they're eligible for, that they paid into and they need, they don't get it. They get emptiness on the other side. And you have politicians talking about being fiscally responsible and sacrificing. Well, what are you willing to sacrifice? Put your money where your mouth is. If you're willing to shut the government down, we're going to shut down your paycheck, because these politicians care more about their paycheck than yours, and that's wrong. They care more about their pensions than your pension, and that's wrong. So put your money where your mouth is. Let's see how much you really care about the people you say you care about. Because being in the military, like being an aviator, anybody who in the military before, please stand up, be acknowledged. Anybody who served? Brothers, sisters, thank you for your service. But for so many of us who've been to combat, I often, when I deal with some enlisted folks, they say, "Don't call me sir, I work for a living." But what people will forget about Army aviation is that the enlisted send their officers to fight. All right? And so being an Army aviator, a combat attack pilot, I didn't tell people what to do. I had to go lead and show them. And so if you want to say you want to call yourself a leader, put yourself in harm's way. Yes, we should absolutely negotiate better spending, reducing our fiscal irresponsibility. But the negotiation that it takes while we've just been in district for the past 6 weeks shouldn't be done on the backs of people who are vulnerable. There should be a negotiation in good faith, and Congress should feel the pain of what they're putting the people through. So yes, we need to negotiate lower cost. We need to negotiate lower spending, but we can't do it at the expense of people who are vulnerable and who need us right now.
Thank you, John. And for those of you, you have blue cards on your tables. We're going to try to get to as many of your questions as possible. So write them down. Try to be a little bit more legible than this individual. Just saying. I think I can decipher it after Debbie's next answer. I want to get to something that was kind of news of the day yesterday, and it's something that we were covering, and that is the Grand Rapids Chamber, the U.S. Chamber, did a survey on child care in the state of Michigan. And they actually put a price tag on what the child care shortage is costing us in terms of our economy. First of all, we're 39th in the nation in labor participation. You think about a hardworking state like Michigan. We pride ourselves on building stuff. Well, we're not building as much stuff as we could because we've got such a low participation rate. 39th in the nation. So how do we address the child care crisis? We've got federal subsidies that are going to be expiring. And we found that it's already costing our state economy $3 billion annually. So is that a federal issue? And what do we need to do to try, at least in the state of Michigan where we make things, you have to show up, you can't do the job from home. How do we address the issue? And does the federal government have a role?
Well, I think it's a federal, state, and local level. It's something that we've all got to work on. I used to get very frustrated when people, during the pandemic, would say people don't want to go back to work, they're lazy, they're not women in the workforce. Caregiving is a crisis that we have in this country. Child care and senior care. We do not have enough caregivers. We do not have enough people. And while we're focused on child care, senior caregiving, senior care is big. Many women left the workplace, found themselves in the sandwich generation of taking care of young children and their parents at the same time. There are not enough caregivers. We don't pay the caregivers enough money. I would talk to businesses. Many of the supplier industry were now talking about as something they had to provide on location for the employees to get them was child care, to get them to come back to work. And there are a lot of, we need, caregiving is one of the biggest crises we're facing in this country. You're talking about it from a child care and it's keeping young workers from going back in, but it's as big a problem as it is in caregiving for seniors as well. I mean, the baby boomers are all turning 65 and older now. There is no one to take care of them. If you've read the studies, there are not enough people for long-term care homes as well. And, you know, we need to pay people a decent wage, but I'm also going to tell you there are a lot of people that want to work from other countries. And somehow, someday, we're going to have to deal with immigration as an issue because small businesses need more help. There are a lot of people that, you know, want to work and would come in and help fill these caregiving gaps. And I think we gotta look at all policies and really sit here and talk about it, because it's a crisis. Men caregive too, I want to say that, but there are women left the workplace, and their numbers have not gone back up as high as the men, because like it or not, women carry a lot of the caregiving responsibility.
John, I can't tell you the number of people that have called into my show saying, well, don't ask for me as a taxpayer to pay for the care of someone else's child. If they couldn't afford to care for them, they shouldn't have had a child in the first place, which is incredibly short-sighted, and it shows we really need to educate people. But what is the federal government's role, or government's role in general?
And these are the same people who complain about having to wait a long line at food service places, or for lunch, or for and not being able to find things with a supply chain shortage. Where do they think the labor comes from? Right? It's very short-sighted. And being in business, we recognize the great importance of things like tax reform, tort reform, regulatory reform, immigration reform. These are the inputs that will actually lower prices, will actually help people to be able to achieve the American dream. This is something that's very important to me, and which is why I authored something called the Reignite Hope Act. The Reignite Hope Act, please look at it, call your legislators, and it would be an honor, ma'am, if you and your team would look at it. We intend this to be bipartisan. This is a tax credit, because I do believe it's in the vital national interest to make sure that we look after the #1 line of defense for our nation, as our parents. And this is bringing back and increasing the child tax credit, right? Bringing back the child tax credit, $4,000 per child from age 0 to 5, and $3,500 from 6 to 17. A child tax credit. The old one under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act 2017 was $2,000. We're increasing it because we recognize that the pain of American families has increased. And I do believe that giving parents the support that they need to spend on formula and child care, and it's been proven that the child tax credit was absolutely, it was an immense help, especially coming through COVID and in the past few years, helping families to cope. And what do you know, that's the thing that's looking at rolling off, right? That's the way the government works, but we can fix that. The second, my colleague and friend, Debbie Dingell, just mentioned very accurately that we have a caregiver crisis, which is why also in the Reignite Hope Act, we have a tax credit for caregivers, for those who are in mental health, child care, and elder care. A tax credit for folks in opportunity zones all across the country. We're going to start with where the greatest need is, in the opportunity zones. Black, white, rural, urban, regardless. This is not about color, this is not about party, this is about helping people. So we're starting where the most need is, in opportunity zones. And in my district, we have 17 localities, six opportunity zones, right? And so, 17 opportunity zones in 6 localities. And so this is for caregivers. This is also about firefighters, EMS, and police, because we want to get and keep and attract the best talent into these areas to both address the caregiver and the public safety crises that we have in all of our communities, where the need is the greatest, but we also need to get help to parents who are raising children and being able to help ease their path. So the Reignite Hope Act, we're really going to be pushing hard, because I think that based upon the feedback that I've gotten from the district and from around the nation, from what I've seen all across the state, is I do believe the federal government has a role in helping this, which I will believe will boost our economy, address some of those labor issues, and make sure that everybody, through lowering prices, can have a brighter future.
I've got some questions of my own I want to get to, but I really want to get to your questions as well. So let's start with this one that we got, which is in a similar vein in terms of caregiving, but maybe in a different way, and that is that we have a behavioral health crisis, and that what would you propose to do to deliver those services so that law enforcement is not carrying the burden of caring for those that are mentally ill in our jails?
We had a mental health crisis in this country. We're not putting them, I'm trying to not be partisan, but I know John Jacobs.
Call a spade a spade, let's hear it.
I mean, we put the,
You have memories of the Lafayette Clinic dancing in your head.
Well, we all know what happened in the state. John Engler just totally cut the budget on mental health, and we put a lot of people on the street that didn't belong on the street, and we've been dealing with the crisis ever since, and we need to, it's a national problem. I think Michigan has a more serious problem, and there are a lot of people that get into trouble because they have no place to go. We have too many people that are homeless. I think we've got people that use drugs and drink alcohol because they suffer from anxiety and depression, and they self-treat and they take care of that. We don't have enough providers. Let me just go basically to that. I was with a number of people from a number of the hospital systems when, how many will remember the young student that went to a hospital and college student went to the hospital, knew he had a problem. There was no bed, no doctor to take care of him. The school called his parents, his father was a law enforcement officer from Chicago. The young man took his father's gun and killed his parents. He tried to get help, and there was no one to get him help. They told me that this was right before the pandemic started. And you know the people that told me this. We didn't even have people going into residencies. I went and sat in Michigan's emergency room. You know this is happening in every hospital. There are people here from hospitals. People are going to the emergency rooms when they're in that total crisis. And there's nobody to take care of them. There's no resident. There's no doctor. There's no bed. I have personally dealt with veterans that couldn't get help. I had a veteran whose mother called me who was not only suicidal but homicidal. And if I didn't have a police chief that understood what I was saying and came with me, and we helped that mother make sure that son did not kill anybody. This is what we're dealing with every single day. It's going to take, you talk about a budget problem, but we got to start putting money into mental health. And the pandemic has exacerbated it. And we got to remove the stigma. We got to not have people be afraid to talk about mental health issues. Everybody suffers it from time to time. I've been open about my family's own history of addiction, my father's serious problems, because people need to know that they should not be stigmatized for talking about it. So what are we got? We should do. We got to do that. So we need more resources. We need to keep people off the street from committing crimes if we can. And I want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to let John take over, and we probably agree on all of this. I respect law enforcement for what they do every single day. And I am tired of false choices that are being made between, are there people that do things they shouldn't do? Yes, and they need to be held accountable. But you come into my small cities, I have 48 towns and cities. I've got law enforcement staff. Canton needs to hire 20 people. I've got all my little, and this is what they're dealing with. We started setting up drug courts and other things to deal with this, so you can try to get people the support that they need, keep them out of jail, put them in programs. We need to be doing a lot more of it. But law enforcement officers are social workers, they're mental health workers, they're doctors, they have to do a whole lot of stuff. And we need to recognize the question, whoever asked it, is a real problem. And I don't have the magic wand to wave, but we need to do one hell of a lot, and it's a lot of different policies that we need to address it.
We've taken a lot of steps, John. We have Veterans Court now, which is a huge help to them. We have drug court. We have the so-called drunk court. Are there other things in the criminal justice systems that you can see as changing and maybe moving that ball forward? And what would be your
It's a change of mentality that I'm seeing. Is it used to be the knee-jerk reaction is see problem, throw it in jail. But with the officers that I'm speaking with, and I just want to echo your sentiments. Your passion comes through on this, and I share that passion. I'm looking forward to working with you. I'm on the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Caucus, and this is something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. The mental health crisis is something that's touching each and every single one of us, especially our children, and the pandemic did exacerbate it. You may not have the magic wand, but together we might. So yes, there are little things that are nibbling at the edges. Right, but what we need is a fundamental shift in how we think about mental health, how we address it, and a lot of times because maybe I'm just a little bit more acquainted with it as being a combat veteran, but the invisible wounds of war, there's a stigma attached to it because people tend to hide it. There's not very much openness in talking about it, and so I think that by providing those resources, those additional resources to help people who need help, are absolutely required. We're looking at cutting budgets from things that are needed in the areas of mental health, and meanwhile, the Department of Defense can't pass an audit, all right? These are things that don't necessarily strike me as right. Yes, we absolutely need to keep our military, our nation strong, peace through strength, right? But at the same time, you don't have a strong nation if so many of us are mentally on a razor's edge. So yes, the addiction courts, the veterans courts, those are all great, but the people falling through the cracks of our hospital systems, our penal system, and our education system, we need to have a system or a plan or a resource that is driven from the communities up, not from the top down, but addressing the need from the communities up, the grassroots up, to be able to better take care of folks who are going through mental issues at home.
We have another question from an audience member, and it is a timely one given the recent events with Mitch McConnell. What do we do about aging legislators? Mitch McConnell, Dianne Feinstein, Nancy Pelosi. This person did not mention the president, but we know that the CNN poll that came out today, the Ipsos poll that came out earlier, it's become one of his defining issues. When is old too old? We know Nikki Haley's talked about having some kind of a competency test or a competency commission. I can't think of a worse bureaucratic mess than that. But what is the answer to aging legislators? And I know there's some news of the day, perhaps, with that.
So I personally think that a lot of the problems we're seeing in D.C. is because politicians in D.C. think they're above the rest of us. When you look at how the rest of the world functions, on many of the boards that you're on, the median age is 63. And a lot of boards, I believe 75% of the Fortune 500, according to Korn Ferry, have age limits for board from 70 to 75. And you look at the military, responsible for life and death decisions as well. You can't serve, if you're not a general officer, is up or out beyond the age of 62. Now you can get exemptions if you're like a public health secretary, medical, or a chaplain up till 68, but there are limits. You also look at politics, let's look at state models. Most areas in the states, if you're a judge, you can't run again, you can't be a judge past the age of 70 to 75 in dozens of states around the country. We have a minimum age that's in the Constitution of 25 to become a congressman. That would have meant that folks like Michael Dell, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, are in the areas where they can invent and they can start these multinational billion-dollar companies, but somehow they're not mentally competent enough to become a representative of the United States. That doesn't make very much sense. But then when you see Dianne Feinstein, who can barely walk, and Mitch McConnell, who's frozen twice in as many months, and now you're going to say that they're in a good position. Look, the world's not becoming a less dangerous place. It's becoming more dangerous. The world's not slowing down. It's becoming faster. The world is not going to wait for us, and they see America has lost a step. Now, people they're going to say, oh, this ageist. I say bullcrap. You have to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself. We have to look in the mirror and say, look, I believe that if you look at what will make us move forward, is there are too many of us who are dealing with issues at home that are not reflected in our policymakers. You have issues with students coming out with degrees they can't use and debt they can't pay because it's not a priority list of people who are in their 80s. You have people who are dealing with mental health at home with their children who are struggling, but it's not on the priority list of people who are in their 90s. You have people who are struggling with health care and child care, but it's not on the priority list of people who can barely function. Right now, this is the oldest Congress we've ever had. And right now, if Joe Biden gets reelected, he'll be in his mid-80s. If Donald Trump gets elected, he'll be in his 80s. And Ronald Reagan was done with his second term when he was 77. And I remember growing up and hearing that he was too old back then. Look, we're not saying send people out to pasture, but we should allow a new generation to come up. We need a new generation of leadership. And I think that will help us to compete and to grow. And you see that in every single aspect of real life. The DC accountability package that I'm putting together has the put your money where your mouth is bill. It has a new gen bill that has 18 years for term limits, because I don't think politicians should go to Washington to pad their retirements and get rich. And I also have an age limit. It's called the Retire Act, and it's intended to that no one vice president, president, Congress, or whatever can continue past 75. But don't worry. I actually think that people will be able to have. So the way the current system is set up is that people who are currently in power don't give up that power willingly. I believe wholeheartedly the framers put in the Constitution, divinely inspired, that we have term limits already. 2, 4, and 6 years, representatives, president, and the Senate. But because the process has been perverted, the people aren't truly allowing their voice to be heard. And people who are at the top already are not able to cycle off. So I think my mic's being cut off for a reason.
Well, yeah, let's.
I do think that there's time for a new generation of leadership. And if the politicians won't let it go, I think the people need to demand it.
Okay. So let me ask my seasoned friend. And we should also point out that you're the wife of a gentleman that did some pretty great work past the age of 75.
Yeah, he did. And he also said it was time to go because he knew when it was time to go, and he didn't feel he could do the job that he felt that a member should do, and he was older than that. Well, I do believe in representative government. And I am not going to say that, oh, you're 75, you're not going to have anybody represent you anymore, especially when some of the most important, challenging issues facing us are the issues of growing older. Now, a lot of people deeply resent the cap, and you're starting to see a movement. We're moving the age on Social Security when you're going to be eligible. We're looking at moving and raising the cap on mandatory retirement because people are living longer. Technology and medicine have made it that way. We need representative government. We need young people, and seniors are entitled to have representation too. I don't think anybody should just arbitrarily, nope, you don't, your generation isn't going to get anybody after this point. So I don't agree with you. I think there is such a thing as term limits, and it's called voting every 2 years, every 4 years, and every 6 years if you're not on the Senate. People need to pay attention. Your vote matters. And that's
an age limit, term limit, though? If not an age limit, I understand what you're saying.
No, I'm not a term limit person either, because I think people there are great people that you want the wisdom and experience of, and I'm not going to name names, but there's some people right now, like maybe somebody from New York without a name, who ain't anywhere near 60 or 70, but is one of the most irresponsible members of Congress that I think may have been elected in the history of our Congress. So, and I know he agrees with me, so I do know. We've talked about it. So, I think what we really need is more engaged voters, because we do need to eat. I hate fundraising. I hate the money. That's why I'm not running for the Senate. Everybody knows me. I'm not going to raise $150 million. I'm the person, the elected, that wants to dig in. Sandy was making fun of me and how much time I'm spending on sewers. Two of the people I talk about sewage with all the time are here. But this is what I want to be. I want to dig in. I want to solve problems. And I think that's what you want in your elected. You need to look at what you want, who you want to represent you, and that's what elections are for every 2 years. And I don't think, so I think we could both name people that we think probably shouldn't be there right now. But I also think it's up to the people of the district that are voting and I wish we could find a way to make money less prevalent in the whole political. I think the money is out of control. You guys have to be sick of being asked for money as much as you are.
If you're not, see me after.
And there's a website.
Yes.
He calls you more than I do. I'll leave you alone.
There is major news made last week with the Centers for Medicare identifying the 10 drugs that they will be negotiating over. The Biden administration has made some pretty lofty predictions and promises about how much it will bring down the list price. Most of us don't pay list price. How much can these people and the seniors who we love reasonably expect to see prices drop especially those that are dealing with diabetes, and I believe arthritis were the classes of drugs that were most affected here. How much can they reasonably expect, and how much of that might be shifted to those of us in the audience who have private health care?
So let me say this. I'm somebody that thought we should be negotiating far more than 10 at a time. We spend more money on research in this country and than any nation in the world, and we're paying twice what any other nation pays. We can go across to Canada and get medicine for a quarter of what you're paying. If I could do something immediately, I would get rid of, sorry if anybody's in this room, but I am not your fan, pharmacy benefit managers. I mean, it's ridiculous. You go in, and I sit with these pharmacies, and I know what the pill costs them. I know what they're, like Lasix is, this was somebody who was giving this to me last week, so it's in my head. It's like, you pay $5 for your pills, and they're charging $100-something from a pharmacy benefit manager. That is outrageous. You see it in the antibiotics. You see it in, some of these chemotherapy drugs. We shouldn't be paying this. Insulin, the bill that we passed, capped insulin at $35 for diabetic users. People, you're already talking to people. And then the companies fouled and put that cap on for all the users. Okay. I mean, come to a town hall meeting with me, Guy, when the mother who's working 2 jobs and still living below the poverty line, and child has asthma and needs an inhaler that costs her $800. And that inhaler doesn't last a month. And we're going to, by the way, you want to reduce the budget? You know what's going to reduce the budget? When Medicare is paying less money for these prescriptions because they're negotiating the price, we're going to cut the cost of Medicare.
Okay, and I'm certainly not diminishing the anecdotes when we hear them.
They're not anecdotes, it's the truth.
No,
we pay twice.
In talk radio, I hear from my listeners who say that they are dealing with this every day. But there's also the law of unintended consequences as well. As we cut drug prices for 9 million seniors on Medicare, will we see that shifted to private plans? And what does it do to the research money that brings us the cures faster?
Yeah, so this is the part where I got to trust you a little bit of vulnerability. And you're going to hear something you don't often hear folks who are in Congress say this. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. This is the part where someone who's been on the job for 8 months maybe listens. I brought on someone specifically to help me with healthcare, and there are a number of you who've reached out over the past few months, and even today in this room, with a willingness to help. How can I help lower the prices for that mom who's paying $800 for an inhaler? My son needs an inhaler. I mean, and we didn't know that he was allergic to tree nuts until it was almost too late. We had to take him to hospital in Michigan because there were too many beds taken up because they had a mental health crisis at Beaumont. We had to go all the way to Michigan in an ambulance, and he needed that inhaler. Now, luckily, we're in a position, praise the Lord, where we can afford our health care. And at my company, we made sure that all of our employees were on the same health care that me and my family were on, because that's extremely important. But for those who are not in the situation that those of us in this room are, I need your help. Please contact my office with your ideas for how we lower costs and prices for people who are in desperate need of medical help, but at the same time continue to incentivize the best research and development the world has ever seen. How do we do both? And both, not either or. Each person in this room understands how business is. You don't get to pick whether or not you pay your employees and get them on good health care, or take care of your shareholders, or take care of your customers. You have to do all of it. And I think our job is to do all of it. So if you would please contact my office if you have any ideas for how we lower costs and maintain the best research and development in the world, because I don't have all the answers. I really need to lean on you here.
Let's do a quick wrap up because already the red light is flashing at me. But
oh, wow.
I know, it goes quickly. Just 2 minutes. What is the one thing that as you return to Congress that maybe isn't one of the sexy priorities you hear about, but you wish was a bigger blob on the radar?
It is a big blob for me, with mental health. One of the things that I really want to dig into is I believe Congress is almost criminal lie to states of a fully funding idea. I believe this Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. I believe we're currently funding at 14% when in 1975 it was supposed to be at least 40%. I would like to fully fund IDEA to get more money directly to the classrooms to help our teachers and kids with special needs, but also make sure that more general funds are being spent in education to boost our education, and then modernize it, in addition to fully funding it, modernize it to include the mental health struggles that our kids are facing today. I think if we nip that in the bud, I think that would be a first major step, because I'm terrified. I have 3 little boys. John is 9, Hudson's 8, and Christian is 4. And there's not a day I send them off to school that I wonder if they're going to come back in a body bag. We have to address what's going on in these schools, the mental health crises that are going on. And so it's something that we need to talk more about, the mental health issue, and I like to start in schools with kids.
Debbie, you already have the busiest radar that I know of, but is there something else that you would like to see tackled in this session?
Well, I have a ton of issues. I mean, I think the two that are gonna, I mean, we have not talked to, I don't know how you haven't, the elephant in the room. You know, UAW is, contract expires next week on the 14th, and we're in the middle of one of the biggest transitions in mobility we've seen since the automobile was invented. And we gotta make sure that we've got the foundation to support. I mean, we all care about the environment. There is nobody, we had 7 tornadoes here 2 weeks ago. We've seen that knows how critical this is, but we have to do it in a way that keeps our jobs here in America, has an industry that's strong, that people can afford an electric vehicle. A whole lot of people can't afford them.
We're bottom 10 in the state of Michigan. We build them, but we're not buying them.
People can't afford them. We got to build out the infrastructure nationally. So I'm probably a pain in the White House's ass right now about this, but you know, I ask all those questions. But I also want to bring our supply chain back to this country. COVID showed us that, you know, it's a national security issue on so many fronts. And people, you talk about healthcare, 80 to 90% of our drugs are being made in India and in China. I did a drug roundtable last week at Michigan. It's not, FDA will tell us we've got a shortage of about 100 some drugs. Michigan's got a shortage of over 500 drugs every single day. That's a crisis we got to deal with now. People who have cancer cannot get they can't get the chemotherapy that they need. That's on my radar this month too.
All right. Thanks to you both. Please give our representatives your appreciation. We thank you for your questions and for your time today.
Thank you.
Distinguished guests, this concludes our program. Thank you for attending Meet Southeast Michigan Members of Congress.